Pam Bondi and Jack Reed walked into that hearing room with two completely different versions of reality. And within minutes, it was clear only one of them was talking about the real world Americans actually live in. Reed didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize the moment. He did something far more dangerous for the person across from him. He described facts so plainly that there was nowhere left to hide that he started with a device most people had never heard of, but once you understand what it does, you can't unsee it. A forced reset trigger, installed in minutes.
Senator Reed.
Chairman Moran, thank you. Yes. Madam Attorney General, on May 16th, the Department of Justice announced that it dropped litigation to enforce the law against forced reset triggers. These are devices that can be installed in a few minutes on guns like a AR-15 in order to match the rate of fire of a machine gun. In fact, according to demonstrations on YouTube and elsewhere, you can dispose of an entire 30-round magazine in about 4 seconds. So it is a fully automatic weapon. In the press release announcing the settlement, you are quoted as saying the settlement, quote, will enhance public safety. How does putting more automatic weapons, which have been against the law since the 1930s, enhance public safety?
Thank you for that question, Senator Reed. What that will do, it will enhance public safety by settling the litigation, because it is a guarantee that the manufacturer will not put that in handguns. We settled those cases because it was the right decision under the law. Nothing's comical about this. These devices are materially the same as bump stocks. The Supreme Court said last year that they are not machine guns under federal law. We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. I'm a career prosecutor. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep Americans safe. What we should be concerned about up here are all the illegal guns flowing into our country by illegal aliens who have been free to walk into our country over the past 4 years. And we've taken thousands of those guns off of the street, including drugs, and including violent criminals.
Excuse me. How can you go ahead and say we're more safe today because they will not put these automatic firing devices in pistols, which have magazines of about maybe 20 rounds at most, or maybe 10, and have a range much less than an automatic weapon? Have you ever fired an automatic weapon?
I have.
Well, you understand then that that's a device that was designed to kill people. It's not a hunting rifle. It's not a target rifle. It's mass fire. And you made a compromise saying, well, don't put them in pistols, but you can go ahead and put them out in automatic weapons.
We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. You and I clearly disagree on the Second Amendment.
Well, I agree that machine guns are not appropriate in the United States, and since 1930 or so, we've outlawed machine guns. And these semi-automatic weapons that are produced in volume are so easily converted to automatic weapons that it's you're ignoring the reality, frankly.
I'm following the law, Senator.
Well, yes, that's right. By the way, how many American weapons are going to Mexico in a year? What are we doing to stop American weapons going to Mexico to arm their gangs?
Well, we need to support that on both sides.
Well, what are you
doing? What
are you doing to support it on our side?
We are arresting people who have illegal firearms in our country. We're not sending people back to Mexico with guns. We're throwing them in our jails and prosecuting them.
You're allowing them to be purchased in the United States and driven across the border. Most of these gangs have completely turn themselves into military organizations because they're using American weapons, American technology, and your argument is that, well, we're not doing anything about then.
No, not my argument. That was a policy of the last 4 years of the Biden administration with open borders. You could come back and forth across our borders. You could buy guns. You could take guns off the street. You could shoot people in our country. You could bring fentanyl into our country. You could bring methamphetamine into our country. You could bring cocaine into our country. That was the previous administration.
No, no.
Not this
What
one.
are you doing to stop the flow of weapons into Mexico?
We are arresting flow of weapons into. Our borders are closed. We are arresting illegal cartels. Sinaloa from Mexico, MS-13 from El Salvador, TDA. We are arresting from Venezuela. ATF has seized over 14,600 guns since Donald Trump has been president. That's a 33% increase from the last administration. And think about that. That's like our borders secure.
Were they coming into?
They weren't doing anything.
Were they coming into the United States?
Our borders are closed. They're not coming in or out of the United States now across Mexico. We've done a 33% increase in firearm seizures. Think about that. Think about that, Senator, from the last administration. 33% increase. And our borders are closed. So we're getting all these guns off the streets that came into our country. And I'm so proud of the work of the men and women in law enforcement.
I don't think you've done anything to severely interrupt the arming of Mexican gangs, because that's really not what your focus, and I think your focus should be on that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And can I just add one thing? And
No,
because
excuse
the
me.
borders are closed, the borders are closed, we are stopping the guns from going to Mexico.
Well, let me ask you another question. If the borders are closed, why do we have a division headquarters of the United States Army in Fort Huachuca and military elements across the board when the borders close and Border Patrol can handle it?
As former military, I would think you would know the answer to that, to keep Americans safe.
No, I think it's to promote the president's policies on the border, and the readiness of our forces is suffering as a result. Thank you.
Senator Britt.
Designed to push a semi-automatic rifle to fire at a rate that mirrors a machine gun. Not theory, not speculation. Demonstrations all over the internet show it emptying a full magazine in seconds. And Reed's point wasn't abstract. These are the exact kinds of weapons Congress moved to restrict nearly a century ago, because lawmakers back then already understood something we pretend is complicated today. Speed kills, volume kills, mass fire changes everything. Bondi's department had just dropped litigation meant to enforce the law against these devices. And in the official announcement, she claimed the settlement would enhance public safety. That was the line. That was the phrase. And Reed locked onto it immediately. Because once you say something like that, you own the logic behind it. How does making it easier for weapons to fire like machine guns make anyone safer? That question hung there, and for a moment, you could feel the pause. Because this wasn't a partisan trap. This wasn't a philosophical debate about rights. It was basic math. Rounds per second, magazine capacity, human reaction time. Reed wasn't asking her to speculate. He was asking her to explain how reality suddenly stopped applying. Bondi answered, but not really. She talked about settling litigation. She talked about manufacturers agreeing not to put these devices into pistols, as if the problem had ever been the size of the gun, not what it does once the trigger is pulled. It was a technical answer designed to sound responsible while completely missing the point. Or maybe avoiding it. Reed didn't let it slide. He brought it back to fundamentals. Have you ever fired an automatic weapon? Because if you have, you know exactly what it's designed for. Not hunting. Not sport, not target practice. It exists for one purpose, mass fire. And that's why the country outlawed machine guns decades ago. Not because of politics, but because of consequences. Bondi responded with a phrase she would repeat again and again. We followed the law. She framed herself as a career prosecutor, someone committed to safety. And on the surface, that sounds reassuring. But Reed was exposing the gap between legal language and physical reality. Because laws don't pull triggers. Devices do. And when enforcement weakens, the law becomes a shield for outcomes it was supposed to prevent. Then came the pivot. It always comes. When the substance gets uncomfortable, the conversation changes direction. Suddenly, the focus wasn't on forced reset triggers anymore. It was on illegal guns. On people coming across the border. On crime flowing in from outside the country. The message was clear. If something feels unsafe, look elsewhere. Look outward. Look back in time. But Reed wasn't talking about elsewhere. He was talking about decisions made inside the Department of Justice. Decisions that affect what stays legal, what gets enforced, and what quietly slips through the cracks. So he pulled the conversation back again, this time with history. Machine guns have been restricted since the 1930s. That wasn't controversial then. It wasn't even especially partisan. Lawmakers saw what rapid-fire weapons did in civilian spaces and acted. And now, nearly 100 years later, technology has caught up to loopholes lawmakers never imagined. Devices that replicate automatic fire without technically meeting outdated definitions. That's not a coincidence. That's a warning. And instead of closing those gaps, Reed was watching the DOJ step away from enforcing them. All while insisting nothing had changed, Bondi repeated that she was following the law. Reed pointed out the reality she was ignoring. Semi-automatic weapons produced at massive scale, easily converted, flooding civilian markets. The spirit of the law versus the letter of it. The difference between safety on paper and danger in practice. Then Reed widened the lens. Because this wasn't just about what happens inside the United States. He asked about American weapons flowing into Mexico. Not rumors. Not speculation. Documented supply chains. Cartels armed with firearms bought legally here, trafficked south, turning criminal organizations into militarized forces. This wasn't about blaming another country. It was about responsibility. Bondi answered with numbers. Seizures. Arrests. Percent increases. She insisted borders were closed. That enforcement was working. And again, it sounded strong. But Reed wasn't asking how many guns had been seized. He was asking why so many were leaving in the first place. That distinction matters. Because stopping a fire isn't the same as turning off the gas. And Reed was pointing at the source. American weapons. American markets. American enforcement choices. Bondi shifted responsibility again. Previous administrations. Open borders. Past failures. Anyone but the current policy. Anyone but the present decision. But the guns Reed was talking about weren't ancient history. They were modern. They were current. And they were still getting through. Reed's frustration wasn't theatrical. It was practical. Because pretending the problem starts somewhere else means never fixing it where it actually begins. And every time the answer drifted away from the question, the pattern became clearer. This wasn't just a disagreement over gun policy. It was a governing style. Redefine the issue. Change the subject. Use numbers to sound decisive without addressing causation. And when pressed, retreat to slogans about law and order that collapse under scrutiny. That'd be why the end of the exchange. Something uncomfortable had been exposed. You can't claim to enhance public safety while weakening enforcement against devices that replicate machine gun fire. You can't say history justifies your position when that same history exists precisely to stop what you're allowing. And you can't protect communities by pretending threats disappear because the narrative says they should. Reed was doing oversight the way it's supposed to be done. He wasn't trying to score a viral moment. He was forcing the Department of Justice to confront the real-world impact of its decisions. And what came back wasn't reassurance. It was deflection. This is how policy failures hide in plain sight. Wrapped in legal language. Shielded by statistics. Redirected toward convenient enemies. But physics doesn't care about talking points. Neither does technology. When a rifle fires like a machine gun, the danger is the same no matter how carefully it's described. That's why this moment matters. Not because it was loud, but because it was revealing. It showed how easily public safety can be reframed as a legal technicality. How quickly responsibility can be pushed away from those making the decisions. And how dangerous it is when enforcement retreats while insisting nothing has changed. If lawmakers don't call this out, the gap only widens. And the cost of pretending will always be paid somewhere else, by someone who never had a say in the settlement, the loophole, or the spin. That if you want more breakdowns like this, moments where the talking points fall apart under real scrutiny, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people see what actually happened, not just what they were told to believe.